Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Kofax and KPMG reveal RPA early adoption success stories. My name is David Goodstein and I'm a Member Services Coordinator for the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. It is our pleasure to be a co-host of today's event with Kofax and KPMG. We encourage you at any time to submit your questions to today's speakers. To do so, please click on the questions box, type your question in the space provided, and click on the submit button. We will also be doing a couple polling questions, so we ask that you please participate and choose from the options provided. Today's webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recorded webinar. It will also be available on our website at rpaai.com. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Frank Cassell. Frank?
Great, thank you, David. David and Molly, thank you for once again doing a great job producing these webinars. I know there's a lot of work. Well, folks, we have a great discussion and presentation in store for you today. You know, as I look at my calendar, we're well into the fourth quarter. Anybody in this space is busy as all heck. We have a session here today. Attendance is significant for this webinar as a global audience, and we'll probably end up with close to 1,000 people on. So consider yourself in a very virtual crowded room here. As I was prepping for today, wondering, you know, what's the big deal here, right, with this particular topic? Aside from the fact that we have two, you know, noted and respected organizations supporting this, that being Kofax and KPMG, but it's all about the success stories. You know, many of you have come to us in the past 3 or 4 years looking for trends, tips, many of you asking about best practices, looking for a little guidance. But top of the list is, can you show me or direct me as to where this is working? So we're going to share with you a handful of success stories, and ideally we get you all closer to the reality of the results, the benefits, if you will, both tactical and strategic with regard to robotic process automation. So next slide, David. Let's get through some of the intro related slides. And because I know we started a few minutes late, and I apologize to each of you. So say when, David. Hopefully I don't have a slow feed here.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, super. So, okay, I would say likely half of you are already members. That's how you got invited here. But if you're not a member of the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence, we encourage you to do so. We are the largest recognized organization that focuses solely on this topic. And we do all sorts of things that you would expect, like events, networking, et cetera, and a handful that you may not expect. So you can see by the bullets there, this is our quickie commercial, but membership is free. We have a great team. This is such a hot area that there's nothing I have found more valuable in plugging into an active ecosystem and leverage a little bit of the network effect. That's how we've met many of you. And again, we encourage you maybe sometime today after the session, just click on rpaai.com. Any questions, there's a help desk email there as well. Next slide, David.
Okay.
Oh, great. So here you have it. So I'm Frank Cassell. I head up the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and Artificial Intelligence. Many of you also may know me as the founder for the Outsourcing Institute. So I've probably spoken or emailed or maybe somehow interacted with a couple of dozen of you. For those of you that I'm meeting for the first time, I welcome the opportunity. I'm the host today. I'm the tour guide. The two important guys are just below me on this slide. Bill Galusha, who's the Senior Product Marketing Manager for Kofax. And thank you, Bill, to you and your team for sponsoring today. These webinars are not possible without sponsors, and Kofax is indeed the sponsor today. Thank you. And David Kirk, our buddy, longtime friend and member of our network, Managing Director, Digital Labor of RPA. Who would even think of a title like that years ago, David, right? David's with KPMG, and David, thank you always. It's always a thrill to have you involved in anything we do. So today's presentation really will be a collaboration between Bill and David. I'll be in charge of crowd control. Next slide. Thank you so much. So if you've attended our webinars before, you know we tend to have typically 1 or 2 polling slides. So here's the first, and we encourage you to participate. Where's your organization with regard to robotic process automation strategy? You can see the options that you don't have any formal strategy. You're considering, but not there yet. Actively in the planning stage. You do have a formal strategy that you've rolled out with a few business cases, or you're at top of the class, fortunate few who have formal strategy and you've rolled out in many. So please click on one and only one, and let's see how it plays out. Okay, so there you have it. Most popular is folks seem to be in the planning stages, researching strategy, and conducting a POC. I don't think, I'm not too surprised in that. If I think about where we are now, I would define as kind of back end of early adapter phase and into this kind of second wave, if you will. But that's something that always interesting to see what the responses are. Now, I will tell you, if you look at the 19% no formal strategy, that easily would have been, if you go back 2 or 3 years or so ago, that easily would have been 40, 50+% of folks that barely even got started. So thank you, David. Next slide, please. So these are the topics that we will cover here today. You probably saw this in the email that we sent to invite you to attend, and one or more of these is what got your attention, right? Ideal use cases and those to avoid, right? So the good moves and the bad moves, how to shift from a tactical strategy to strategic. Many of our members now that have been dabbling the past few years are really looking to move to the next level and get some strategic ROI. So looking forward to that discussion. And, you know, this topic around robotic teams, very intriguing. That's created a lot of buzz in the marketplace, and the importance of charting your path, you know, getting beyond the proof of concept. And there are many organizations I know now that are very actively in the POC stage, but, you know, what happens beyond that, right? So we'll be addressing each of these. And our goal is to get this all done in 45 minutes so we could allow for 15 minutes on the back end. So let's keep speeding ahead. Super. Now we're into the meat of this, and David, am I passing to you next, or is it Bill?
This is Bill.
I'll take it. Bill, all yours.
Great. Thanks for the setup, Frank. And the polling question was great. We've done several of these RPA webinars, and if I look back at a similar polling question we did 12 months ago, you can definitely see the shift continue to organizations that are kind of in that early stage, understanding RPA, where it fits in, embarking on the POC, and probably have a few use cases underneath the belt. Maybe you have some robots built, and then trying to figure out the next stage and how do you scale this, which is one of the topics that we're going to cover. I think one of the areas that organizations continue to struggle with is just trying to find the right fit for using this technology, software robots. There's always that question, you know, do I use the robots to fix a problem I have? So it can be very tactical, or do I need to look at it at the problems we're having from a broader perspective, and consider other approaches that are more transformative. I will say RPA is certainly very strategic. So it's not just a tactical approach to solving problems, but it can be part of a larger transformation that is very strategic and very important to an organization. And this really, I mean, the best way to approach this, and we work with our clients on this, and David can attest to this, is really you have to sit down and kind of figure out the suitability of the use case, and then also look at the business benefits. And in looking at the benefits, and what we've seen a lot with a lot of our clients is that you can quickly find the what I like to call the low-hanging fruit opportunities. And simply by using this kind of a checklist of things to go through in terms of, is this process, is this activity or set of activities within a process rules-based? Is it repetitive? Is it structured in nature, which is a perfect fit for software robotics, because essentially what we're trying to do is automate anything that's happening on the keyboard where a human is involved. Is the volume high, which is important? So you're certainly looking for work that's being done on not only on a repetitive basis, but on an ongoing basis throughout the day. The other thing too we've seen too with our clients is that applying RPA to handle the peak volumes that potentially happen at different times during the month or during the quarter or during the holiday season, as an example. So rather than using humans, and staffing up and hiring more people, you essentially use robots as your digital workforce to fill those gaps and also be able to handle the volumes as they increase at certain times during the year. And really the other benefit too is just the opportunity to process out of hours. So, people typically work 8 to 5, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. Robots don't wait and sit around and only work 8 hours a day. You can run these things 24/7 and handling work outside of normal processing or normal business hours. So there's lots of things that we look at to help organizations build out the business case. But I think this is when you think about the, mapping out your roadmap, in terms of what automation projects you want to tackle and where RPA fits in. This is a good general checklist to kind of go through, because the one thing you want to avoid is really trying to take on something that is too complex. Maybe it involves a lot of human intervention. Maybe you're dealing with information that is being passed between people in a very collaborative fashion. So really what we're focusing in on and honing in on is these low-hanging fruit opportunities where there's lots of repetitive work that's being done on a keyboard, things that you can easily map out, things that you can say, well, what the user's doing is going here, grabbing information and putting it into this system. Those are the types of use cases that we've seen as a real good fit for robotics. And David, is this kind of what you've seen with some of your clients, kind of align with what some of the projects you've been involved in?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. And I would say that, nothing on here is an absolute requirement, but these are like the typical characteristics of the kind of processes that are more easily enabled, if you will. I think the one, Bill, that I might think about adding here that we see a lot of, and maybe you could comment on too, is when there's like multiple legacy systems involved that are disparate, don't have like API. There was no business case for building APIs, and RPA can sometimes come in and be that kind of like stopgap solution. You want to comment on maybe a little bit on why that ends up being the case with tools like yours?
Yeah. So if you think of robotics, and for those who are new to the technology, is that one of the really driving forces behind software robotics is dealing with systems, often systems that are old legacy applications, or even external portals, websites that you're going out and grabbing information from that are part of core business processes. And when you don't have APIs that can be easily leveraged to build integration with these systems and different data sources, that's really where robotics can fill the gap. And that's, I think if you're looking for characteristics in terms of suitability, that is definitely that's top of the list. In fact, we have a couple use cases here, customer stories that we'll share here in a minute that really illustrate that point and drive it home.
Yeah, Bill, I've actually even heard some clients and we work with refer to their RPA solution as disposable. It's a throwaway solution that it's going to fix it for the next year and a half for us, right? And the ease and less cost factor of the RPA tends to help with those interim stopgap solutions.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, go ahead. Well, all I was going to say was we have a lot of points that we've raised here as far as what makes it attractive. I think we even talked at the introduction of what we're going to cover. Is maybe we spend a few minutes talking about the kinds of things that can be more of a red flag kind of a scenario when you're looking at a process and thinking, hey, is this a good candidate? And I've got a couple that come to mind, and maybe I can let you pile on.
Yeah.
But, you're sitting with a client, you're looking at a process, and they say, well, this is kind of a gut feel kind of thing. There's no real defined process for how we handle this, but I've been here for 10, 15 years now, so I know how to deal with that. That whole gut feel thing tends to be how do I represent that in a bot, right? So that's one case. The second comment I would make is, and I think you allude to it here even, which is systems. If the application or the processes that you're automating relies heavily on systems that are constantly changing, data is moving around, labels and tags are changing, that can be a bit of a challenge from a maintenance perspective. Do you have any thoughts on the things that make it problematic?
Yeah, the gut feel is a real, that bubbles right to the top. And the best way to really identify, is this something that's repeatable, is to sit down with the, the business users and really record exactly what they're doing. I think that is probably one of the biggest thing is that, if you're dealing with a process with lots and lots of exceptions, understanding what those exceptions are, because robots can handle exceptions. It's not necessarily ruling that out. But if there's judgment calls that humans are making, understand what those judgment calls are. And I think this is probably a good time to kind of segue to some of these customer stories that we want to talk about and to kind of back this up in terms of what we just discussed. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is a story that a customer that we've worked with over the last couple years, and this is a very common use case within banking, dealing with customer due diligence process where you have know your customer checks that are being done by bank analysts. So this is a real significant problem for banks today, where they have very strict guidelines in terms of how they enforce the policies that they need to abide by. So they're looking for specific information about a business entity or an individual that is pertains to things like around financial fraud, money laundering, terrorist financing, things like that. And when we talk about finding the right area and right use for robotics, this is a great example, because in this particular process, the by far the biggest bottleneck is the aggregation or collection of the data that's fed into a case file within a bank that is then investigated by a bank analyst. So a bank analyst is making a judgment call or reviewing the content, but the robots are doing the heavy lifting in terms of going out and gathering up this information. And this information is spread across many different websites and portals, as well as internal systems. So back to David's point about, are there APIs? No, not in this case. There's no APIs. We're not going to go build connectors into the dozens of different external systems and sources. And that's really where robotics can facilitate the collection of this information by performing simple search queries, gathering the information, transforming the data, categorizing it, and then surfacing that information within a case file. So that is a very repeatable use case that we've seen across several of our customers within banking that are implementing RPA today for this particular problem.
So Bill, let me just jump in for a quick second. I know we have to be careful with time, but this brings out a really good point, because a lot of times when folks think about RPA, they're always thinking about just cost reduction. But I think your third bullet is kind of bringing this out. There are significantly other benefits to RPA. So for instance, the amount of data that you're now processing as opposed to relying on humans doing it, and some of the outcomes, I have to imagine it was way better.
Absolutely. So you can see here the thousands of hours they've saved. So in this case, so a lot of times we focus in on, cost reduction. I have dozens or hundreds of people doing manual data entry. Certainly that's an area of cost reduction. But in this particular use case, we're talking about bank analysts, compliance officers, people who are paid to analyze the customers that they do business with. These people are highly paid and highly skilled. So what we're doing is we're taking that work, this repetitive work, out of them and focusing them back on what they were hired to do. And to your point, absolutely. I mean, if you think about what a human can do, it doesn't come in anywhere close to what a robot can do. I can modify searches, I can enhance searches, I can extend these searches to cover a wider array of content that's out there that could touch social media, that could touch many new sites that pop up, services that are available. All of this plays into being able to provide a better quality and quantity of information that these compliance officers require.
Bill, Frank here, if I could mention, just to play off of that, we're seeing, there isn't a deal that I'm seeing now within our network where cost save isn't important, but we're seeing cost save more and more as table stakes now. And you're probably seeing that as well. So it's what else? And if I had to add one more benefit being sought, you alluded to this, but speed. So if you think of of a marketplace like banking or even Wall Street in general, you have a lot of volume and speed is key. And those two variables are often at odds if you're using human labor, right? Lots of volume and the need for speed. So machine speed, over human speed tends to play out very, very well in scenarios like this. Do you agree?
Yes, yeah, definitely. In this case, so if you think of a case file, and they're dealing with, as you can see, several thousand of these cases each week. Each one of these cases required a couple hours of work of gathering up the information. So in terms of speed, what a robot is doing compared to what a human was doing is night and day. We're talking about a couple hours to run several different checks to being able to run these within 30, 60 seconds. And these checks are done overnight too. So back to the point, you got employees that only work 8 to 5. These robots can run overnight, so that when the employee, the bank analyst or the compliance officer comes in, information's right there, surfaced right in a nice report, a nice dashboard, providing them the information that they need to dig into. So if we could go to the next use case, and I think the whole purpose of this webinar was really to share some real-world examples of customers that are using software robotics today. Another great example too is really, and this one is in transportation logistics. This is an industry that where Kofax has several customers that are using RPA in pretty much the same way. One of the ways in which they use it is around scheduling appointments. Appointments being scheduling a shipment, tracking that shipment, notifying the customer when it's going to be picked up, and then when that shipment's picked up, tracking that shipment across to its destination, and then closing out the load. Crate Carrier is a customer of ours that is using our RPA product today, specifically for this, along with many other uses for it within their company. And they've been in production for about 4 years now. 380 robots that are basically automating a variety of different tasks, everything from monitoring email, as you can see from this flow diagram, to logging into a transportation management system and scheduling a pickup, and then also going out and logging into a shipper's portal, which again, these are portals that don't have APIs, and there's dozens, if not hundreds, of these portals that a third-party logistics company would be interacting with. So the value add here is it's the time savings, it's the cost savings, and it's also, I'd like to call it cost containment. So one of the things within these types of companies is that margins are generally thin, and customer service is the utmost important differentiator with their competitors. So if you can focus people on adding value by communicating, working with the customers, bringing new clients on, and not spending time, thousands of hours each week, doing stuff like inputting information pertaining to a shipment pickup or sending an email to a customer to confirm the pickup, that all can be done using software robots. So one of the David, one of the questions that I think sometimes when people look at it, they go 380 robots. Well, what are these robots doing? They're doing different things. They're automating different parts of the process, and so these could be robots that are specifically designed to monitor email. You could have another robot, as I mentioned, that's then taking that email and logging into a transportation management system, and then you could have a third robot that's logging into a portal. So robots can run in linearly, so you can think of how workers work. These are digital workers that are communicating with each other. So robot 1 is communicating with robot 2, and robot 2 is communicating with robot 3. You can also have robots run in parallel too. That's another common way in which these robots are deployed. Have you had other similar projects like this, David? That where you have customers using robots and that are involving both internal systems and external sources?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I was literally trying to be courteous to our flow of slides because I'm looking at the clock knowing we have another 10 slides. But yeah, absolutely. I do believe, like you alluded to, that the art of kind of like creating your robot architecture is important, right? So when do I parallelize? When do I divide activities? And decide, instead of having one monster bot that handles like 15 different activities, is the right answer 5 bots or 15 bots, right? So we absolutely spend time helping our clients understand the importance, and we tend to, like you alluded to, go to the model that has let's do a clear, short task, kind of like the agile approach, right? And microservices, kind of approach to create smaller bots that have specific activities. And then when necessary, to always understand how much of that might I have to do at a time. So do I need to allow for possibly having 50 parallel bots do that activity, or is one going to be fine? And that is absolutely strategic in the overall architecture.
Yeah, exactly. So the last use case, we can go to the next slide, is it's really around, this is cross-industry and could be very applicable to many different industries. This is within finance and accounting, within a shared services group. What's interesting about this use case is that if you think about invoice processing, you have a large percentage of companies today that take paper, so invoices come in via paper. They scan that paper, they classify the document, they extract the data. That's something that Kofax has been doing for many, many years. In this particular case, what the customer was looking to do is how do I take a paper to digital process and really make it a full digital process using software robots. So if you think in terms of, well, where are these invoices coming from? Where's the source? In this case, the invoices were coming from bill payment facilities. And these bill payment facilities provide portals that you can log into and grab the invoice data along with the actual invoice. So what they've essentially done is taken robots to basically get to the source, go out to these portals, grab the invoice data. In the underlying business process that's already in place today, the robots are simply feeding the data, the electronic data, into that process flow where the validations and are occurring before a robot then takes the information and then posts it into their ERP system. So essentially, what they're achieving here is by the end of the year, they expect to have 95% of their AP operations fully digitized, and we'll be retrieving upwards of 20 to 22,000 invoices every month, and this is all going to be done using software robots. But it's a great example. So when you're talking about assessing where the opportunities are, in some cases, paper is not going away. Paper is a channel that you need to support for your customers. So that's where robots could be very complementary. In this case, there's an opportunity to use robots to to become less dependent upon paper and finding a new way of digitizing and automating a process. So this is a real good example of where robots can kind of help you take you to the next stage within automation within like in an area like your shared services group. What's your take on this, David?
Yeah, so Bill, this kind of plays back a little bit to the conversation that we were having earlier with Frank, and he was raising as well. Another great example. This is one of my favorite examples because this is another great example about this is not just about cost. Because when you start talking about taking out 22,000 different paper items a month out of my equation and being able to pull that digitally, that has got to reduce the error counts. Right? It has to be a much higher quality product, less exceptions, things like that. This is all those ancillary benefits above and beyond just cost savings that, Frank was alluding to, that I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So when you're dealing with electronic data, whether it's data or it's data content that's captured within a, say, electronic PDF, the ability to handle and process information much quicker goes up. And that's really what they've seen is a significant increase in productivity. So whereas it used to take them several days to process an invoice, really what you have now is you have these robots that are scheduled to run at certain times during the day or certain times during the month, going out and grabbing this information. Again, the key here is that they already had an underlying workflow process built. So it's not like these robots are recreating the wheel in terms of creating a new workflow process. It's just simply feeding the information into an existing platform where there's business rules and logic built in that helps cleanse the information, validate the information before it's actually pushed into their ERP system. But so great point, David. I mean, the productivity goes up, the speed at which we can do this goes up is much quicker. And certainly the accuracy, which are all the key points that we talked about on the first slide in terms of assessing opportunities.
Exactly.
So, David, I know KPMG has created an approach that differentiates between different types of automation tools and capabilities. Perhaps we can transition to kind of talk about the different classes and kind of where some of these use cases fit in. So if we can go to the next slide.
We go to the next slide. So just a quick cut at logistics. So I think we have like 7 slides left and about equal number of minutes. I think we're going to absolutely have to cut a little bit into our Q&A, but I'll try to take things up a notch as well as we do that. So absolutely, we took a look at this back in 2014 when we got into this area that we now call intelligent automation. And it became really clear to us we were going to confuse everyone if we lumped everything together into one basket. We're talking about things that are swivel chair, cut and paste, and in the same sentence, you're talking about things that involve machine learning and artificial intelligence. Honestly, we were confusing ourselves. And so we said, hey, look, let's go back and help ourselves, help our clients, and categorize these a bit. And we took a look at it, and we created these 3 classes, all right? And so I'll cover them, at a reasonably high level, and we can always address more in Q&A. But if we start on the left, we have, the class 1 or basic process automation, and these truly are the swivel chair kind of activities. This is the stare and compare. We talked about disparate moving data, disparate systems and moving data from one to the other. That's this kind of activity, right? So, we had one of our largest client engagements was a client that had really dozens of disparate order entry systems. And we solved that problem using these bots. This is the kind of solution we're talking about in class 1. We're cutting and pasting data from here over there. No reason to have a human doing that work, right? When we move on to class 2, the middle class, if you will, the enhanced process automation. It's similar to the basic automation, but we struggle because a lot of opportunities and the tools that support those opportunities in this class have a little bit more to them than those in class and the basic process automation. So you might see tools here that support natural language processing so they can deal with unstructured data such as emails and chat sessions, things like that. Some of these tools have knowledge out of the box. So they're dedicated to a specific functional area, such as finance or IT. And so they have like hundreds or even thousands of built-in workflows right out of the box that you can then, kind of configure for your environment. Then we start looking at class 3 and the cognitive piece. And this is probably, of the 3 classes, the one that's kind of like significantly different. And when we try and explain, and it also tends to confuse a lot of people. A lot of our clients are like, yeah, so what is this whole AI cognitive thing all about? And so we try and say there's like 3 critical aspects of a cognitive system. And it's the ability to perceive, to reason, and to learn. And so when I say perceive, the system takes input in some other way other than a keyboard, for instance. So it understands human interaction or even feelings and emotions. And then the ability to take information and reason and draw conclusions, right? And the third aspect being that learning, which is often, I'll say probably one of the most misused terms when you talk about true machine learning, which requires some kind of feedback loop or additional data so that the system can kind of get smarter as it goes along. It doesn't do the same thing over and over again, always getting the wrong result. After 5, 6, 7, a dozen attempts, and it says, I'm not really getting the answer that I want, it's probably time for me to change my behavior. That's machine learning, right? So yeah, and I'll tell you something, Bill, sometimes it may seem like overkill, but I think this slide and this 3-class representation is probably the single slide that our clients relate to the most, honestly.
Yeah, and are there words of caution with these classes? I think sometimes people look at this as a maturity model, which obviously it isn't. And some of the use cases, even the use cases I just talked about, really kind of transcend class 1, class 2, in terms of in terms of basic repetitive work, as well as handling structured and unstructured data too.
Sure. So I can, before I go here, I can honestly say I was part of the team that created this classification, so it's okay for me to provide some caveats and clarifications. And so one of them you just started to allude to. This was never meant to be a perfect science. That wasn't the intent. It's a guideline. It's a learning helper, if you will. There's definitely gray lines between these, and there's overlap. A tool doesn't necessarily sit all in one of these classifications, or a business process may have characteristics of multiple. So it's not meant to be a perfect science. And you brought up a great point. And sometimes when we start putting tools into certain categorizations, some of the vendors get upset. It's really not meant to be a maturity model, Bill, just like you alluded to. This is really about being able to look at an opportunity and understand what the needs and requirements are, and then picking the right tool. You don't want to solve a basic process automation problem with a cognitive tool. It just doesn't make any sense. And so it allows you to look at it somewhat segmented and draw some conclusions. And we can, for the next comment I'll add, let me advance to the next slide, and I'll provide a little bit of clarification or explanation around this graphic. And admittedly, we could probably do this graphic better, but we've really seen kind of an odd phenomena. And the poll kind of shows that a lot of our participants are in that proof of concept stage. And the oddity that we've noticed is we've seen far too many organizations roll out a proof of concept or their initial automations in class 1 and class 2. And then they find themselves saying, okay, now what? Right? It really happens so fast. And Bill, I'll tell you, it's not a matter of a lack of success. Literally every proof of concept we've executed has gotten either at least as a bottom line the expected results, right? It's really more about the planning and the lack of kind of putting an enterprise strategy together that kind of ends up putting a client, one of our clients or organization, into one of these troughs, right? And the inability to kind of keep on going. Yeah. And they sputter, right? They kind of get to that spot and they sputter.
That's a really good point, the sputter, and that's because I think even going back to that, the question we asked at the beginning is a lot of people are at that POC, or maybe they got a couple use cases under their belt, and I think where folks are now, many organizations are, is this kind of, how do I get to that next level, right? and how to really get that to scale. And that kind of brings us to that, I think our last topic that we wanted to touch on was really around kind of the service models. And I've seen a lot written and in a lot of discussions. I've participated in some discussions on this, but maybe you can kind of touch on that from your perspective. Might help.
Hey guys, Frank here. I just want to jump in. A quick comment, and then we need to insert one more poll question. But David, just some feedback. I love this slide. I think you did a wonderful job of breaking this down. And I agree with you that there'd be no shortage of people that may be concerned of do they fit in one category or another. But from the standpoint of simplifying this and demystifying it a little bit, for many of the practitioners out there, I think this is a winner. So great job. But I'm getting a note that we want to insert at least one quick poll. So here it is. This is a quick one, simple one. And basically, we want to get a sense of where you are as far as skill level. And anything is fine. There's no shortage of beginners out there. So if you are, that's fine. So how would you rate yourself from the perspective of RPA? Now, by the way, that says AI, and it's been transposed. It should say IA, meaning intelligent automation. So forget AI for a moment. Not too many people expert in artificial intelligence right now, at least not in the broader community. But from the standpoint of robotic process automation and/or as we get more toward intelligent automation, cognitive, how would you rate yourself? There we go. David's moving quick. He's watching the clock. So continue to be, beginners continue to be the majority, no surprise. Intermediate, about a third. So if you look at beginners and intermediate, it almost adds up to 100%. No surprise there. 5% are expert, and that includes Bill, you, and David. You're in that crew. So hopefully we get that to.
It's a it's a telltale sign that where we are in this journey, and I think David, the next the round of operational model. This is something that I think a year ago, if you can go to the next slide, that wasn't coming up too much. You heard the Center of Excellence, and you had some of the the trailblazers, the companies that are already farther along than others, but most I think are now kind of this, okay, I want to really scale this, what's the model I need to, and I think you get some good insight in terms of, there's no perfect model, no checklist of how you divvy up responsibilities, but maybe we can touch on that, and then we can open it up to some question and answers here.
Yeah, I think in the interest of getting some question and answers, Bill, we'll probably have to maybe pass on discussing the shared service centers and Center of Excellence pieces. But let's talk about this model, because this plays back to the troughs and the valleys that people get stuck in on the prior slide. And one of the things that we've really tried to do is help our clients get out in front of this, right? And to create like an enterprise view from the very start. So we start these discussions right where a lot of folks on the phone are sitting right now, in the proof of concept phase. And say, look, you need to start thinking about your enterprise strategy. And a big piece of that is, what does my delivery look like? What kind of skills do I need? How does it get organized? Where does it sit, right? And so to help that discussion, of course, you can imagine we have like hundreds of slides behind this that get very detailed. But at a high level, that's where the conversations start. So we bucketized the kind of capabilities required into three categories. And the three categories that you see here: service, technology, and oversight. And at a very high level, the service is, this is what I need. This is what I'm thinking about. If I'm a business unit and I'm thinking, I want to experiment with automation, I'm thinking I need an opportunity assessment. I need someone who can define my requirements, build code, run code. Those are things I'm thinking about, right? And so the kind of people that do that are people that understand the tools. They are comfortable with business processes. They can partner with the business to help them problem solve and figure out the automation. And the second category, it's technology. And this is this kind of like double-edged sword of RPA. It's often touted and promoted as this is not complicated. It doesn't involve a lot of technology integration. You can do it very quickly. It's very available to the business, right? But the bottom line is there are fundamental technology pieces you just need to pay attention to. Like, does it plug into my architecture? What about information security, right? So, of course, the kind of competencies and skills you need here, not surprisingly, are those technical folks, the folks that understand what the enterprise architecture is, understand data privacy, understand information security. And then lastly is the kind of like the oversight bucket, you know, and as much as everybody really want to kind of do their own thing with RPA across the enterprise, it's really not a good idea. And you really need to be thinking about, you know, governance, corporate, you know, the corporate policies, risk, and things like that. And to some degree, these folks are the overlords, right? You know, these are the guys that are saying, hey, look, you know, you may want to run fast, but slow down and let's make sure we're all in alignment, right? But they're never going to be effective unless they have the right kind of skill sets, and those skill sets are like communication, right? So you have to be able to go out and work with the business lines and communicate with either the carrot or the stick, whatever it is you're going to use to kind of keep them in alignment with corporate policies and strategies. So, you know, those are the high-level 3 buckets. And then I think let's try and do this, Bill. Let's cover the next slide, which takes it a little bit lower, and then we'll kind of maybe pass on the last 3 unless it kind of comes up in the Q&A. So
yeah, because my question too, and I hear this often, is you know, structure of roles and responsibilities, and you know, there's different models, and maybe you could just kind of at a high level explain, you know, the different models between, you know, without going the last couple slides here, but just from a, you know, the shared services to a COE to a hybrid model, which hybrid model is something that we're seeing quite a bit within our clients.
Yeah, okay. So maybe before we go there, because we'll use those slides, but they're based on this slide. So we'll just quickly touch on the key points here. So this is an elaboration of what we just looked at. So of course, across the slide, you see the service, technology, and oversight, like we just discussed. But above that, of course, is kind of an enterprise strategy. Let's kind of focus on what are our objectives from an enterprise perspective. You know, where are our budgets coming from? How am I staffing this, right? But the second piece is very important in that horizontal bar that sometimes people overlook until it really gets way down the pipe is, what about my people, right? Because when I start doing significant amounts of automation, it impacts people. And in some cases, it's simple because I'm just going to move those people, like you alluded to, Bill, to more strategic, you know, work that needs to get done that's not getting done. But in other cases, they truly become redundant. And then I have to think about how do I retool and reskill these folks. So that sits over top of these. And so in interest in time, I'm not going to regurgitate the services, technology, and oversight. We talked about that in the last slide. But you drilled into this already, Bill, which is does it always look the same? Is this the model, or are there different flavors of this model? And absolutely there are. So I hate to do this to people because I know what it's like to be on a presentation and just flash things up. But let me put a sentence together for each of the models, and then we can either take Q&A, Bill, or you can drill into it. So if we could go to the next slide, which takes this exact model and says, all right, now look at this from a shared service center perspective, where everything is done under the centralized model. So all the things we talked about from the opportunity assessment and build and run. Sorry? Oh, right on through all the oversight and technology, and it's delivered to the business units. They don't have to have any particular skill sets whatsoever in this model because they're quote unquote buying everything they need from the shared service center, right? The counter to that would be the next one. If you go to the next slide, which, and again, I'm going to admit in advance, people use different terminologies for things, but what we refer to as the center of excellence approach, in which case I'm going to centralize my expertise and I'm going to be more consultative. So I'm going to help folks, but I'm not doing the work, right? I'm going to let them come to me. I'm going to set standards and policies and give them tools and things that they can use. And I may be doing some of the technology pieces as well. But I'm going to let each business unit go off and do their assessment, build their bots, you know, and potentially even kind of manage the dashboard of all their bots running and whatnot. But I will provide them expertise, okay? And then the last model, and you got to this, Bill, a minute ago, and I know we're covering these, you know, we plan to spend 3 or 4 minutes on each of these slides, but is the hybrid model, which is kind of like, guess what? It's a no-brainer. It's a combination of both. You know, for some business lines, I'm actually a shared service center, and I do everything for them, right? But for other business lines, they're not going to make that investment. They don't have the staff, the budgets, whatever. They're going to, I'm sorry. The other business lines are going to make that investment. They don't want to buy it from a shared service center, right? They're going to go off and do this on their own. And so they'll use me more as a center of excellence because they're going to go off and do their own bot creation. So it's a blend of both as you go through this. So Bill, I'm going to pause there because I know we're down to like 5 minutes now. So
yeah, so
let's
if we can take some questions, Frank, I think that came in, and while we're doing that, if we could just transition to the next slide here. So if you're looking for more information on Kofax and our RPA products and solutions, all you have to do is go to kofax.com. But Frank, I'm sure there's some questions that have come in that we want to try to quickly answer.
Yeah, so here's what I'd recommend, just to maybe cheat a little, gents. If you can stay on, and you both stay on till 5 after, could we extend 5 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Bill and David?
Yep, that works for me.
Okay, super. So let's do that. And for those of you in attendance, if you don't have to rush off, we try to wrap these on time, but there's a lot of questions here. There are many, which is a great sign. But and I just want to insert again, Bill. Thank you. Thanks for sponsoring, and David, thank you for really being our resident expert here, along with Bill. I know that time is the scarcest resource for you. I think there's one more quick slide, and then we'll get into our bonus time, David. And I just want to mention to those of you, if you haven't already heard, we have another upcoming webinar on successful automation. But the thing I want to make sure, just kind of a house plug here, is we have our big year-end conferences, one in New York, December 5th and 6th, and the other is in London. I'll be at both. We typically have a full house. We're likely to sell out. In New York, we've sold out every year to date. So if you're interested, check it out. And it is free to practitioners. Okay, let's dive in. My goodness. So reflective of the, if you think about the last poll about how many are beginners, there are some fairly basic but important questions here. For example, one attendee here is troubled a bit by the use of the word robotics. You know, we've heard this over the years, right, David? You know, people are saying that when they hear robotics, they think of something like a General Motors plant as opposed to software. So I don't want to put you in a spot to have to defend that reference, but what are your thoughts on, you know, the robotic term and the word RPA?
So Frank, that comment is spot on. It has caused great confusion, and that's not new. And that's why at one point in time we started using the term digital labor, right? That became problematic elsewhere, and that's why we've kind of moved to intelligent automation. So we kind of use the term, we use the term RPA here because obviously a lot of folks have heard the term over the last few years, but we've actually started removing the graphics that are on our slides that show like physical robots because it's incredibly confusing to people. So that's a quick commentary. Yep. We're trying to use the term intelligent automation now way more than RPA.
Yep, I agree. So Bill, let me give you a shot just so we could skim through a few here. This one caught my attention, and something that we've discussed internally. Has to do with organizations starting to evolve their hiring practices, right? So, so you think of this, digital age, and then you think of a digital savvy workforce. Bill, are you seeing within your organization or even your client base people looking for more digital savvy candidates when they hire?
Digital savvy meaning people who are familiar with the technology, or
yeah. So if you think of the new world order versus what was being done 2, 3, 4 years ago, just look back at some of these slides.
Right.
Are you looking for people that have more of a beyond the typical hires? Are you looking for people that are more familiar with automation and or AI and or data science? Anything you could talk to along those lines? Or are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the skill set is really around this digital automation, and I even read something the other day about this whole idea of a chief automation office, right? So it's a shift. It's a different mindset. So I mean, back to the person's question about robots. Yeah, it is confusing, but think of it as a digital workforce. That's thrown around. You have your human workforce, you have your digital workforce, and I could see large enterprises having a chief automation office where you have people who understand where these digital workers, these software robots, fit into their organizational structure and what it's going to cost them, and So you're definitely seeing that shift.
Mm-hmm. And David, I love your title as well, right? You think about this, Managing Director, Digital Labor, RPA. That in of itself is not only a reflection of a commitment from KPMG standpoint, but also I think we'll see new roles and new titles reflecting those new roles. Do you agree, David?
Oh, absolutely. And we have extensive numbers of folks that are dealing with this. It's hard. There's so many. It's hard to even centralize. But well, as Bill said, you start meeting with clients, and they have organizations that are focused on. You start seeing these titles when I'm on panels, and we hand out business cards. Right, as you've seen, some of the ERPA panels.
Right.
People have intelligent automation, robotics, as part of their title. Because we're trying to say, look, this is real. You can't keep ignoring this. This is a real phenomenon.
No, absolutely. So Dave, I want to stick with another tough question. Okay, so here's what it is. So it's here it goes. Is the objective to replace manual workload from the service environment? Why is there so much hype on RPA when there are other technologies that achieve this? So let me paraphrase a bit. Every once in a while, each of us are in this discussion as, what's the big deal, right? Our organization has been doing automation now for a decade or so. Now, we all know this is different, but David, how do you explain kind of the more recent trend and differentiate that as, better, more powerful, more significant than what was around maybe a decade ago?
Yeah. So, and Frank, that's a 30-minute conversation itself. It's a great commentary. It really, and it's a fun, entertaining. So what's changed? What's made this so important all of a sudden? And there's all kinds of things that play into that. Just the availability of data, for instance, and the ability to be able to process. We've mentioned natural language processing. So there's so many sidebar discussions. But part of it, Frank, is a lot of tools in the past. What I think if we go back to the basic process automation tools, what we've been referring to as RPA, one of the biggest differences is that these tools really are meant to look like a user, right? So other tools in the past are doing automation. You typically have to get in, you're writing scripts, you're getting down, you may have to operate within one system only because you don't have an API to the others. See, RPA discards all that. It says, no, let's just make this thing look like a user. Let's give it a user ID and a password. Let's let it log into this system over here and grab a piece of data. And that enables it to be done so much easier and faster. I could not agree more. You take an environment like IT has been automating things for years, but yet there's still the opportunity to take all those automation tools you have in a data center and you overlay like this one that runs at the user level and kind of connects those together, pulls data from over here, enters it there, does a query over there, and it just looks like a user. And that's, I think, one of the biggest differences. It's meant to look and run like a user.
Yeah,
well, David,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Go right ahead.
If I could add, it's very, RPA is very, in robots, is complementary. So, if you have, say, for example, a business process automation platform, we see it a lot with our clients where they're using robots as solving problems standalone, or these robots are used in a broader business process. So, it's another technology, another opportunity to solve problems that typically have gone unsolved for many years. That's what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. If I could add just a final comment on that, there's already too many sound bites in this world, but my short answer is, after decades of us benefiting from software that kind of supports and enables a knowledge worker, this software actually can replace knowledge workers. So I see it less of a technology play, although some of us tend to treat it that way, and it really is a labor play. So can they work side by side? Absolutely. Can they replace? Sure. Can they augment and enhance? Sure. But this is clearly not this isn't your father's software, right? This stuff is powerful, and you think of the term digital labor, that starts already to kind of build the picture for you. But as we're speeding along, go right ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that, Frank. To your point, it's not. This is just not another screwdriver that allows you to tighten that screw a little tighter and chop out 5 more cents out of my process. When you start looking at the higher level class, like class 2, class 3, these are transformational things. It's very possible you're now doing different things and new things that you couldn't do before without automation. I used to do a sample space, and maybe I run a test, and I would sample 3% of the data that I had. Now with automation, you know what? I'll check all 100%. Right? So you end up doing things way differently than you used to.
Absolutely. So let's wrap with this. And how about parting advice? So Bill and then David. Bill, for those, there are many folks that are relatively new and also a handful of advanced on this webinar. What is your advice to them as they begin to plan for 2018? Parting advice, one piece.
Parting advice, if you're new to it, there's no shortage of materials to read and just get a better understanding. Back to that point, what's a robot? I'm confused. And for those that are kind of in that middle, which is a lot, there's a good percentage, where you're doing a POC and, got a few use cases, plan. There's a methodology to this to really get it to scale. And we've got several hundred customers that are running hundreds or thousands of these bots in production. So it is feasible. And there's a lot of success that we have to show for that. So that's my parting
advice. Great, thank you, Bill. David, parting advice?
So mine would be similar, and I think the short synopsis would be plan for success. And I say that, Frank, because literally I can't think of a single POC that didn't work. And so we have like 30-something% of our audience out doing POCs. Plan for success. It happens, and it happens quickly. And then you get caught if you're like, well, what do I, from the get-go, figure it's going to work, and start laying out your enterprise plan so that you're prepared to move from that point of, the proof of concept or those first 2 or 3 bots you rolled out into more of an enterprise strategy and delivery model.
No, that's great, David. And if I had to finish off with my word of advice is plug into the network, plug into the ecosystem. The reason why we built this global ecosystem and the reason why we allow everyone to plug in for free is that this is a rapidly moving, very fluid environment. Things are changing quarterly. Questions about how, where, who, pricing questions, governance questions, selection questions. And it's a very active and fluid environment. I'm a big fan of the network effect. And hopefully those of you that are already plugged into our network are seeing the benefits here today, thanks to Bill and David. If you're not, please continue to do so. Again, sorry we ran a little bit over. There are a bunch of questions here that we didn't get to. I'm going to see to it that we answer and distribute. In the meantime, again, Bill, thank you to you and your team. David, if it wasn't for these webinars and events, I'd never see you, buddy. So I'm happy we got another one, check the box on another one today. And everyone else, have a great day.
Thanks, Frank. I'll see you in December.
Thank you.
Thank you.